Well, good morning. This is Ian R. Crane, and it's the morning of Friday, 25th of January, 2019. And the title of this morning's broadcast is the EU Totalitarian State and the Urgency of Brexit. Well, yesterday I called out the atrocious article in the Daily Mail written by Stephen Glover. He's well past retirement age and, clearly should be well out to pasture because, obviously he is the epitome of old hacks that have lost the ability, if they ever had it, for proper investigative journalism and simply writes on the back of a lunch with, a spokesperson for the unconventional gas industry. And the article was so full of tired myths. It would be an embarrassment to any serious journalist. But I guess, basically at that time of life, you just take whatever comes along, huh? No, not true. One should uphold the highest ideals. But of course, we know that in today's corporatist world, basically it's whomever pays the piper calls the tune. Well, today, the Daily Mail doesn't let us down again. Article here by Dominic Sandbrook this time. The Road to Anarchy. And their subline is MPs are plotting to derail Brexit, but as the rebellion in Venezuela shows, leaders who ignore the will of the people risk putting us on the road to anarchy. Well, nice little bit of distraction here. Obviously what's going on in Venezuela is very serious. I don't have time to get into the US involvement in the manipulation of affairs in Venezuela. And of course the globalists have had every intention of totally destroying Venezuela ever since the death of President Chavez some few years ago. Well, what's interesting in this article here, I'm not going to read the whole lot, but the final couple of paragraphs. And, there was an MP who back in January 2017 said, we didn't go into the referendum saying, I want you to vote Remain, but to be honest, no matter how you vote, I'm going to ignore you. Well, fellow parliamentarians, the MP went on, simply must make sure that Brexit is implemented. Well, what's really interesting here is that this MP goes on to say, for if it were overturned, then Britain might become a country that no longer respects democratic values. Now you'd think, well, those are pretty wise words, but who uttered those words? Well, it was none other than Yvette Cooper, who is now on point trying to get a second referendum. So clearly somebody has basically got to her and obviously spelled out a few facts of life and probably made a few offers regarding potential positions after her parliamentary career. So, this is pretty much indicative of the hypocrisy that exists within Westminster. Well, of course, this article focuses on Venezuela, but, a lot closer to home, there's a country that is really in a, state of uprising, basically, as a result of numerous policies implemented by President Macron. And although the media likes to present the straw that broke the camel's back as basically the rise in fuel taxes, the reality is that this has been brewing for some considerable time. And there's no question that, whether it was spontaneous or not, but let's give it the benefit of the doubt at the moment, but there is no question that the deep state is doing everything it possibly can to attempt to infiltrate and undermine the Gilets jaunes in France. But I want to, rather than read the Daily Mail verbiage, I want to read you a post that I got from a friend of mine, Willem Velderhof, a former KLM pilot who now lives in France. And he writes, he says, why is there a deafening silence in the Western mainstream media regarding the number of civilian casualties as a result of the escalating state-sponsored acts of terrorism of the French government against its own citizens? Because fake news is not only about false information, it's mostly about half or no information. Besides the number of casualties, it is especially the type of injury that is shocking. And a very relevant question here is who is committing these violent acts against the French citizens, and where do these units come from? Some hair-raising statistics, supposedly non-lethal weapons have caused so far over 109 severely injured citizens. This includes 12 women. At least 15 of the 109 have lost an eye, and a whopping 78 of them were shot in the head, which has left at least one of them in a coma. Any French police officer with a spark of conscience and free will left in his being will not shoot his or her ethnic brother or sister, let alone aim for the head. Chances are high that foreign and partly kosher police units are deployed for crowd control in France. The psychological reasons for deploying foreign troops in a country is a well-known strategy. Foreign troops have less problems committing violent acts, like shooting at citizens in a foreign country. Besides the fear as a result of being outside one's own habitat, there is less to no emotional connection with the targets, and this combination lowers the threshold to commit violence substantially or completely. By means of the back door, like the Lisbon Treaty, the cynical New World Order elite, the parasites, are blatantly introducing an absolute dictatorship. And if people protest too vigorously, they will be defeated by a professional gendarmerie, a military force from other countries that is not afraid of committing violent crimes against its citizens. The European Gendarmerie Force, Eurogen4 or EGF for short, is a European intervention force with militarized police functions and specializations in crisis management. The EGF was launched by an agreement in 2006 between 5 member states of the EU: France, Italy, the Netherlands, Portugal and Spain. Of course, all to protect us against the terrorists that they have themselves created in the first place. It becomes clearer by the day for anyone who dares to see this unpleasant reality who the real terrorist is. The recent agreement between Germany and France and the Brexit freak show served to obfuscate the full steam ahead push for the creation of an EU military in the shadows of attention. As stated from the higher EU echelons, at the European level we are already preparing intensively for the counterinsurgency, which, considering the envisaged measures, could certainly assume civil war proportions. EGF's founding documents also provide for the basic possibility to intervene in EU countries that have not ratified the Treaty of Lisbon or want to leave the group of good guys, the EU. The situation in France and the deployment of foreign troops is a sneak peek of the grim shape of things to come if people do not wake up and take the appropriate action. Now, I'll put a link to that post under this video, and attached to this post are some very, very interesting graphics and all the supporting documentation about the injuries and the deaths that have resulted in France as a direct result of the yellow vests. So here we are in the UK with now a little over 10 weeks, I think it is, until March 29th, when the UK should exit the EU. And basically within the statements from the EU are the veiled threats of intervention from other EU countries. And this is something that I presented in a presentation 11 years ago, shortly after the EGF was founded. And I made the observation that, obviously, as Willem has done, that the benefit to the ruling parasites of using foreign troops or foreign police to quell unrest is that there is no emotional or spiritual attachment to either the territory or to the people who live in that arena. So it absolutely staggers me that, what is occurring in France, we're now seeing yellow vest movements emerge in the US, in Canada, in Australia, in Belgium, in the Netherlands, in Germany, in Sweden, and I'm sure other countries as well. And the observation that Yvette Cooper made quite astutely a little over 2 years ago is that politicians either take note of the feeling of the electorate, of the general population, or they run the risk of major civil unrest. Well, the quickest way to shut down any discussion with the Remainers, who generally have very little ability to articulate their case, it's almost like Stockholm syndrome, but just ask them two very simple questions. One, to describe how the EU legislative process works. Two, to ask them to explain the Coudenhove-Kalergi agenda. And maybe three, ask them which is the act of parliament that actually ceded the sovereignty of the UK to the EU without any intervention or any opportunity to vote by the British public. That came much later. So it's not going to be easy with Brexit, there's no doubt about that, and maybe, just maybe, the pain has to get a little bit worse so that people start to participate more in the process, and that the politicians start to recognize that ultimately they should answer, they must answer to the people of this country and not to the corporations and the lobbyists who are constantly whispering in their ears, taking them out for nice lunches or dinners, taking them on overseas jaunts, and then promising them, lucrative sinecure positions once they leave Parliament. It's sad that anyone under the age of probably 50 has no recollection of life before the EU. And, whilst there's no question it wasn't a utopia, but nonetheless, families could enjoy family life where a single wage earner could provide for that family. That just isn't possible anymore. And just take a look at what the EU has done to Greece, to Italy, to Spain, to Portugal, to Ireland, now to France and Belgium, and even in Germany. People are starting to get very, very concerned at Angela Merkel's clear intention to destroy Germanic culture. And the French are very proud, and rightly so, of their culture and of their nation state. And it shouldn't be any surprise that they are reacting against the globalist agenda and the destruction of their culture and of their nation. So this is a very, very important time in British history. And obviously there are certainly more people who are active today than a decade ago, but it's not enough. We need people right across the country to get involved and to start holding their elected politicians to account. Because if you don't hold them to account, then basically they have free rein to do the bidding of the lobbyists and the global corporatists. Well, certainly Mark Steele in Gateshead is on point in challenging the corporatist 5G agenda. And 2 weeks today, on Friday, February the 8th, Mark will be back in court. This is the appeal against his criminal conviction for threatening behaviour against 2 Gateshead councillors. And that appeal was due to be heard yesterday, but it has been adjourned, and it will now be heard on Friday the 8th of February. The actual court is yet to be determined. So, please, if you're anywhere in the northeast or you have serious concerns, and of course you should have, about the 5G agenda, then get along to the court in Gateshead or maybe Newcastle on Friday, February the 8th. And of course, I'll keep you updated on that. And then Mark's case to resist the committal or the intent to commit him to jail by Gateshead Council for breach of injunction, that will be heard sometime after February 25th. And of course, we'll keep you posted on that. Elsewhere, of course, another individual that has challenged the corporatocracy's monopoly on medicine is David Noakes, who is currently wallowing in Wandsworth Jail. And David has asked me again to thank all those people that have taken the time to write to him. He is overwhelmed by the magnitude of the support that he is receiving. And hopefully within the next couple of weeks, I should get the opportunity to go visit with David. And then when he comes out, we can no doubt start thinking about the plan of action and how we challenge the absurdity of the MHRA, the pseudo-government agency that is it has a role that is basically nothing more than to protect the monopoly of big pharma on healthcare, and of course to make sure that people do not have access to cures for serious diseases like cancer, and that the pharmaceutical industry can maximize its gravy train. Well, people say, Ian, don't you have anything constructive to say? Well, of course, I am trying to be constructive. I'm trying to share my insights and encourage people to participate in the process. And, why do I do this? Because I think humanity has so much to offer. And, in my downtime, I love watching the YouTube videos where the human spirit and, the talent and the breadth and depth of capability and that humanity has, I am in total awe of. And yet it is the global corporatists who want to destroy that and effectively keep people in mindless, abject slavery. So, it's a bit of wet and miserable up here on the edge of Epsom Downs this morning, and I shall be heading north. So I will join you on Monday from a location somewhere in the north of England. So have a great weekend, do your own research, and never ever underestimate the power of sowing a seed. You're not necessarily going to get the reaction you might like straight away, but you've sown the seed, and that seed will germinate at some future date, maybe in a few hours, a few days, a few weeks, a few months, or maybe even a few years. But you have still sowed that seed. You may never see the true benefit of what you've done, but nonetheless, don't stop doing it. So have a great weekend, and I'll catch you on Monday morning at 8:30. You take care now.